Well, we'll be hearing from Yalda on that again later here on Impact, and she'll also be talking about the tensions in the region over China's claims to the South China Sea. Now, that's one topic that is not on the agenda in Beijing, according to the president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte. He's on a trip that could mark the beginning of closer ties between the two countries, and while the South China Sea dispute has caused tensions in the past, Mr. Duterte has talked about improving relations. But while the president tries to ease tensions abroad, there's been violence at home, with a protest against the presence of the US military in the Philippines. Now, this is a police van that drove into a crowd of protesters just outside the US Embassy in Manila, leading to scenes like this. Tear gas was used, and protesters say at least 3 people were taken to hospital. Those pictures coming into the BBC. Let's speak to Richard Heydarian now, who's a political scientist at the De La Salle University in Manila and joins us via webcam. Thanks for joining us. What does this protest tell us? We know that President Duterte is not a big fan of America right now, but is this suggesting that the people aren't?
Well, the unfortunate incident in front of the U.S. Embassy is yet to be fully investigated. It seems that there was a very unfortunate incident there happened because there were people who were actually injured. But if you look at the number of people who were protesting in front of the U.S. Embassy, there were really few of them. And in fact, just this morning, a survey came out that showed the United States enjoys a plus 66 approval rating among the Filipinos, which is extremely high, while China suffers from a negative 31 approval rating in the Philippines. So by and large, US is very popular in the Philippines, while China is still a very unpopular country. And this shows how difficult it is for Duterte to really reshape his country's foreign policy direction towards China. But he has been trying very hard to paint China in a more positive image, because for Duterte, what's important is that the Philippines revives bilateral relations with China, breaks the ice in very frayed relations because of the South China Sea disputes, and he has brought with himself all the top tycoons of the Philippines, 450 top businessmen, to sign a whole range of deals there in Beijing, so that he paves the way for major ramp up in bilateral investment deals, which have also suffered as a result of disputes in the South China Sea.
Yeah, we know the main reason for him being in China right now is trying to get business between the Philippines and China. How much should we read into that, though, Richard? Is that because he's thinking, well, hang on a minute, we're not going to have such a great relationship with America now, and it has been a special relationship for some time? How much should we read into this trip to China?
I mean, when it comes to diplomatic atmospherics, I think U.S. and Philippine relations no longer seem as sacrosanct and special as before. But if you look at the fundamental military-to-military relationship, it is still there. In fact, Duterte's own senior advisors, including former President Ramos, his chief China negotiator, openly warned him against severing or dramatically downgrading ties with the United States, which is a source of full spectrum assistance for the Philippine military. So the Philippine military is interested in keeping that relationship, while Duterte is trying to at least diplomatically and economically pivot to China. I think what Duterte wants to achieve here is to play the giants against each other. He wants to extract more concessions from the US by saying to the Americans, if you criticize me more on the human rights issues, if you do not increase aid to the Philippines, there's always the China card that I can go to. And then he's also telling the Chinese that he's willing to at least negotiate certain parameters of bilateral deals with US in order to get concessions in the South China Sea. For instance, joint patrols and joint military exercises with the US in the South China Sea could indeed be suspended. In exchange, he's also trying to negotiate in China a joint fisheries agreement in the Scarborough Shoal and a joint exploration activities in the Reed Bank. So this is a very difficult balancing act for a person who just a few months ago was just a city mayor, and now he's the head of a country in the middle of a global geopolitical chessboard. So you can also imagine the steep learning curve that Duterte has to go through.
Yeah, fascinating and perhaps worrying times. Richard Heydarian, many thanks for joining us on Impact.